Okay, so today we're going to talk about a typical real estate transaction from beginning to close. Um, and this just chart breaks it down. This is also in the buyer presentation in generic and also just available just as a separate document. So this helps if you, the whole process can seem intimidating to people. And this is everything from the transaction from beginning to close. So some of it, like when the initial consultation talks about talking to a seller and wanting to talk to them. So because this is coming from the perspective of a particular property from beginning to end, not from the buyer's point of view or the seller's point of view. So initially you have a consultation and you meet with the seller and what are their needs, and what do they need to do? And typically that's usually called a listing presentation. When you go ahead and you walk through that. A listing presentation, there's a number of ones that are templates ready to go. There's some in Command that are ready to go. There's some in coaching that are just generic and ready to fill in the blank. There's our office pays for Scott Leroy and Michael Lewis, and they have templates ready to go. And then there's also one, we have a marketing branch in our office that's with the other offices that are owned together called Forward Marketing. And they can put together a very nice, there's a sample in the office of mine, listing presentation that's roughly around 30 pages, give or take. And it's beautifully done. And it's kind of a walkthrough. It's a page turner, which is nice. And what I did is I asked him like, hey, I'm going to make this available to the coaching and I'll just make it generic so it fits for anyone. But if they want to go ahead and then have you do and personalize it, they'll do that for you. And then so they do it for a fee. And I think the typical fee is around $45 or maybe a little bit more than that. And then they'll also print it, and it's $8 a copy and a minimum of 25 copies. And it's really well done. Well, in fact, I've already had one agent walk through the office and say, hey, this is really good. Where'd you, who did it? And I told them it was Forward Marketing, and they're ordering theirs. So you can do it either way. But as I said, too, it's also a page turner. So it makes it very easy to like, hey, well, this is something we offer. Hey, this is something else about us, and so on. But of course, before you do any listing presentation, you want to make sure you're familiar with your presentation. So that's one thing. People ask if they can do a digital presentation. Sure, not a problem. Some people will do it on like an iPad. Some people will do it, on something, else. That's all fine and dandy. Just make sure you've gone through it once. Don't shoot from the hip, because with technology, as right now you guys saw, any little thing can go wrong. And if it goes wrong, then you're like, oh crap. So you also, it's best to have some sort of backup copy with you that's printed, just to be on the safe side. Because, you also want to show that you're prepared. You're going to be selling somebody's home if you're on the listing side. So, this is what you're preparing. Another thing is that when you start with the listing presentation, that's just the presentation. You also want to make sure that you've done your research on the home, that you've looked up what the title says about the home, you've looked up the comparables for the home, and you've done what's we call in our industry the CMA, the oh my gosh, comparable market analysis. But you would also, when you present that, don't say CMA, because that's when you use the terms that are used in the industry, and just say data. The data shows your home is really, the price point should be around $864,000. That's, people understand data. And so you're not having to explain to them something they don't understand. The whole idea of the CMA is a term that real estate made up. So anyways, just a little FYI there. And then if there's any other things like in our office, you automatically get access to the Altos real estate research. And so every day you can look up what a particular market is for a zip code or a city. And so I've done that when I've done a listing presentation where and it's formatted differently. So when I did a listing presentation and I had to, and it kind of like I had to do a big boy presentation where this person didn't know me. So I had to bring out all the heavy guns and I was actually competing with somebody else. So I had that really nice listing presentation ready to go. I had the Altos dark market analysis that I was talking about. That was ready to go. And then I did the CMA, I did the data, and I had all that ready to go. And I had everything bound separately. So, so it was easy for me to present like, hey, this is, by the way, the current stats in the market. This is what is specific to the home. And we're showing the data compared to the other homes in the area. And I'm giving you a summary. And then these are the things that I do as an agent. And that's when I'm going through the listing presentation. So it all presents itself very well. Some people could do that in a big book, but you know, how many people like to read through a big book? When it's broken up and a little bit more easier to digest, it makes it a little bit, you know, nicer. I'll say the other agent I was competing against did that. He had like a full presentation that you can tell he put together as a template, and it was around 96 pages, I think, but it was like a big book. And I get stuff like that from different vendors all the time. I'm like, I don't want to read through all that. Where if it's broken up, I can go immediately to what I like to, you know, what I'm looking at. So for me, that's the way I like to do it. Now, that's when I had to do the full-blown listing presentation off of my database. I've had literally my first listing. I had these people that I've known for years call me up and they said, hey, it's time. We need to sell mom's house. When can you come over with a contract? Can you do it tomorrow? Yeah, I can be there tomorrow. Okay, great. Let us know what you think the home is worth and we'll go from there. That was it. So I literally went in and drew up the listing contract and took it over there. Now, of course, I still had to research, you know, how much the home is probably worth, look at all the different factors of that. Also, usually in a listing presentation, you're going to talk about what are things that have been done to the home. And it's always good to have something ready to take notes. And let me tell you something, generationally, if you're on your phone taking notes and you were do that in front of like somebody like my mom, she may know you're taking notes, but she may not know. She may not think you're on Facebook. She doesn't really know what you're doing. Where if you have a pen and a pad, they can relate to that and you can actually, you know, see that. So, you know, I love technology. I mean, we're using it right now, people, but understand what is going to be a better presentation to somebody else. And you do want to take notes on home. And there's a few things I take notes on that I took a note and then I realized, I never really used that, but at least you have the note initially. And you take note of things like, oh, you have hardwood floors. Oh, okay, you remodeled the bathroom. Oh, and I see you put in some upgrades. You did this, you did that. People are going to be proud of their home and the work they've done most of the time. So they're going to understand, you know, that. And when you're taking these notes, they're like, no, we're really proud of it. A home I recently sold in Whittier, they bought this very specific countertop and they were very proud of that countertop. So I like made a note of how special that countertop was because they were really proud of it. You know, okay, that was in there. They also, when they remodeled their kitchen, they put in a little wine fridge. So I made a note. Oh, great. You guys have a wine fridge. I mean, those were all the kind of notes I took. Plus, when I'm actually going to list the home, I need to know this information. That's when you ask questions too, you know, and you ask like, well, what upgrades have you done to the home? What things do you know the home may need at this point? And, you know, you phrase it, you don't want to say, you know, what things are falling apart on the home. Okay, that's not going to go over. But if you say, well, what things do you know that are some needs of the home? People are going to appreciate that. Okay, what are some things that are needed? You know, like, oh, the house needs a new roof. Oh, the house needs this. No, we know that, you know, this needs to be done. Those are all those sort of things. Like for us on our house, we literally 2 months ago had a brand new roof put on and we had a new HVAC system put in 3 years ago. So, oh, all that stuff. If somebody were, you know, it's like, hey, our hardwood floors have been refinished. But that was actually done about 5 years ago. So they're good. They're not in perfect shape, but they're good and they're good enough, you know, okay, fine. The HVAC system is newer because we just had it put in. The roof is brand new. We just had that done, but I still have the original windows. So if somebody were to ask me, well, what do you think, are some of the things the home still needs? Well, I do know we need to upgrade our windows. We do need to put in the double panes. That's the kind of stuff that, may be it. Now, mind you, I'm in a mid-century modern, and my home was built in 1957. So it's very common for my type of home to have the windows replaced. However, I mentioned the idea of like Miracle Mile. In that neighborhood, a lot of those homes, those people are proud. Those homes were built in the 1920s, and they have the original windows because they want the original windows. So remember, you got to keep all that kind of stuff. Every situation's different. And in that sort of scenario, like, oh no, these are the original windows. Yes, they're great. That's what you go with. When you're talking to them about their needs, remember, this is about them. It's not about you. You're talking about their needs. You want to find out what's their motivation. So what are their time constraints? What's their, you want to ask them how much they think the home is going to sell for, because everybody has in their mind what their home is worth. And that'll give you an idea where you're going to be at. What if the home is worth $894,000 and they say, oh, we think our home is worth $950,000. Okay. Well, now you're going to have a conversation about that and how you're going to price the home. You're going to talk about, and what if it goes the other way? Well, we think the home is probably worth about 875. Okay, great. I've looked up the data, and actually it could be worth a little bit more, but we can talk about that conversation. And what you're going to do is, and I've had to do it both ways. If a home is overpriced where they think it's worth more, and they're going to be stern on that, and a lot of sellers will be stern, this is how much we want for the home, then it's prudent to say, okay, great. I actually think, and you'll see determining price a little bit later on, but this is the conversation you can have at that time. I actually think that the home is worth, no, I don't, sorry. Now that's where I totally messed up. So don't do that. The data is showing us. So it's not my opinion, it's the data. It's the market is showing us. The data is showing us the home is worth about $894 if buyers were to look at that home. Now, I understand you want to list it at, 950, and that may be shooting a little bit high. According to the data, I understand, I've seen your home, and I understand why, for a lot of people would think it may be worth that much, but really the data is not showing that. So, and again, this is when you felt out that they're going to be really stern on that price. So let's do this. Let's list it close to the price you're talking about. Let's list it for $849. I'd really like to, or sorry, $949, or I'd really like $939. But if we have to do $949, we can do that. But if we don't get any serious offers within 2 weeks, why don't we revisit the price? Because then the market is speaking to us. Is that reasonable? Because what you're doing then is when you're going through this, you're setting them up to like, okay, you're setting the expectation that I'll work with you on that price. However, if we don't get that in 2 weeks, which is a very reasonable amount of time, then probably we should talk about the price, because then even though we've determined that this is what, we would like to sell it at, the market is telling us it's not going to sell at that price. And then that's when you have that conversation of like, okay, and then you're setting it up 2 weeks later, you've already prepared them. But you've done two things. If you say the data, you've diverted the whole, it's my opinion versus your opinion, because you're never going to win that. Even if you win it, you've lost. That's just not a good way of doing it. But if you say, oh, it is the data is telling us, then you're out of the game. It's like, oh, no. This is what the market is telling us what it's worth. And if that's what the market is telling us it's worth, then we need to adjust to that. So that's how you would do that. You asked about time constraints. You would ask, where are they planning to go? What are they planning to do? Do they need help with that? Oh, well, we're actually planning to move. We're planning to move out of state. Oh, okay, great. Do you already have a place in mind? I can find some agents and refer you. Do you need a moving company? What can I do to help you with that? You know, and if you need that stuff, okay, great. What are they wanting to do financially if they're wanting to sell? You know, like, okay, is there anything you're wanting to do, you know, with that? Are they wanting to get into a bigger home? Are they wanting to move into a smaller home? You know, what are the different things? A lot of times we call some homes starter homes. You know, it's a little 2-bedroom, 1-bath home, and that's a starter home. It's the first home somebody buys. A lot of condos are starter homes for some people. And then they take that and they built up equity over time. And then they take that equity and they put into a larger home. That may be one of their financial goals. And then if they have other goals in mind, I had recently buyers in Highland Park that when I talked to the listing agent, one of the goals that those sellers had, they had never had any plans on moving, but their daughter was accepted into the Pasadena School District. So they literally had to move within a certain amount of time. So they would have an address in the Pasadena School District that could back up their daughter going to school. So that's a other goal. You know, there could be other goals involved. And then that's when you talk about their goals. Then you talk about, okay, what are we going to do about the price? You know, what are some things that are going to qualify about that? And then that's when you do the comparing other properties that are currently for sale. You compare other properties that are currently sold, and you look at what's called the absorption rate, is how much is on the market right now. You know, is it a seller's market? Is it a buyer's market? And what are the odds of selling, you know, this property? When you look at the properties for sale, you take into account if anything is overpriced. So what if, you know, in a perfect world, it's a cookie cutter neighborhood and this home should be worth $894, but they have that one listed over for 1.2. That's lovely. Nobody's going to appraise that home at 1.2. That's not going to happen. So that's one where you realize, okay, that's overpriced. And many times sellers will say, well, they have that home available for 1.2. Yes, that's true. However, it hasn't moved. You know, now you're going to be not going to be a smart ass about it, but that's a conversation you're going to have. I had a home last year I sold in Whittier where the home that went for sale next to him was 2.8 million. And it did have a much bigger acreage because it was a huge parcel. Our parcel was big. We were 27,000 square feet. And this one was, I think, almost 40,000 square feet, but it was a weird home. It was a really weird ass home. You walked into these small rooms. It was just an odd home. They listed it at 2.8 million. And I had to tell my my seller, look, I understand that they're listed at 2.8 million. However, their home in a hot seller's market hasn't sold in 59 days. And so it's telling us that their home is overpriced. So then when I talked to my seller about the price for her home, she understood that we weren't going to be anywhere close to that. Even though her home was nicer, we weren't going to get that high. And so we ended up actually listing her home for 2.49 and we closed at 2.64. So that was a conversation that we had. The homes that are sold really tell you a lot more what is being sold in the area. But even then, you want to look up the homes. What if, like, well, that home across the street, that home sold for blah, blah, blah. Okay. And you look at the pictures and you realize, oh my God, but that home was just a crappy home. You know, they haven't upgraded anything. You know, you could see, you know, people, you know, there was all these different things that were wrong with the home. That could be it. Or what if you're on a block where the home you're in is lovely and it's on a hill, but you have no view because the homes across the street block the view, but the home across the street has the view. Well, then that home is going to go for more money because it has a view. Your home doesn't. Those are all the different things that when you look at a home that's sold, you also want to look at it. So you just don't look at the properties. When I'm doing a comparative analysis, I go in and I'm actually look at these homes. What is specific about these homes? I'll look at the descriptions. I'll look at the photos. And sometimes I'm like, nope, doesn't compare. Nope, doesn't compare. Yes, it compares, you know, sort of thing. And those are the things that you want to walk through. And the absorption rate is how many homes are on the market. You know, how hot is everything selling? And that can be a key factor as well. I've had a few homes that have been in a neighborhood that rarely does anything in that neighborhood go for sale. In fact, the home I just mentioned Rarely does a home like that in that neighborhood go for sale. So that was one of the key factors we were able to factor into the price. Then you're going to look at you're going to talk about, you know, subject to property inspection, all the mechanical stuff, some of the stuff I was telling you. But what if you can see, oh, the roof needs repair, oh, there's, you know, there's foundation cracks, there's other things that need to be done. Okay, we need to take that all into account. That's some of the stuff we need to take into account. What would be some of the necessary repairs? What if they're not major repairs like that, but what if it's like, you know, the place needs to be repainted? What if, like, my living room is painted blue, and I love the color of my house and everything, but honestly, if we were to put my house up for sale, I would paint the living room white, because in my type of home, that'll sell. So that's what I would do. So it could even be like, it's not a repair, but it would help the home sell for a better price. Destaging and declutter and depersonalize. This is major, because a lot of people see their home and like, it's not cluttered. Yes, it is. Think of it like when the camera adds 10 pounds to every person, you always hear it, and it really does. Same thing with staging a home. When photos are being taken, anything that draws your attention draws your attention. For an example, one big pet peeve of mine is that, oh, well, you know, it's like the whole home is clean, except in the shower with the clear shower panels, I can see your shampoos and I can see your loofah. And that I immediately take down before we do the photos, because your home is drawn to that, or your eye is drawn to that. And that's just for the photos. If somebody is living in the home, then of course they can have it up during open houses and that kind of stuff. That's normal. People don't pay attention to that. But for the photos, you strip it down even more. But less is more when it comes to decluttering. So if there's a lot of little knickknacks, you get rid of it. You know, I've got in my house, I have a nice solid wood entertainment center that right now I've got a number of books in there, and I have a little Stitch statue because my husband loves Stitch. And I've got a Snoopy statue because I love, you know, Snoopy, and we've got a few other things. I would probably take out one stack of those books, and I would leave only 2 of the figurines, and that's it, because it declutters it. It opens it up, because you don't want it too busy. That's one of the reasons of decluttering. And then you also want to depersonalize. So if you have a lot of family photos up, you want to get rid of the family photos. And I've had some sellers fight me on that. They're like, I really want to keep this up. Okay, in your bedroom, keep a couple of photos up, but that's it. And I've told that to people, because when you're doing an open house, they expect that. Now, during the photo shoot, I still get rid of the photos, but you know, the open houses, I get rid of that stuff, because when buyers need to come in, and this is how you explain it, when a buyer needs to come in, they need to feel themselves wanting to move into the home. And they can only do that if the home isn't personalized to you. And that's because they are going to want to personalize it to them. And wouldn't you want to have the most opportunities with the buyers out there that would give you then the most offers at the best price? And that's how you would go ahead and phrase that to them. The other is cosmetically enhanced, and that's some of the painting stuff I was mentioning about, and that can also be staging. I've had a client that he lived like a bachelor in a perfect apartment or a perfect condo. And I mean, everything was spotless, except he had way too much clutter. So that was one of the things. He had family photos up, so we got rid of the family photos. He was adamant he didn't want his mother's photo taken down. So I was like, okay. Then he thought about it, and then he moved all the photos except his mother's photo in this one area, which was fine. During the photo shoot, I removed it and then put it back up. But during the showings, it was just one family photo. So it was depersonalized enough to, they didn't feel it like it was theirs. But he had 2 famous prints that were up, but a lot of people would consider those prints kind of like a little bit tacky. So what I did is I actually went to Marshall's, and actually I have now a supply of these things, but I went to Marshall's and I bought some big, you know, generic canvas prints, and I covered those things up, and it was fine. You know, it was nice and jerk. That was some of the stuff that had to be cosmetically done. Gabby's got a question, or Gabriel, sorry. How big of a radius do you use for your comparables? Okay, great question. Usually it will, when you use the Cloud CMA, which that's the one I really like to use, it'll kind of put like, oh, there's an automatic radius. If it's a cookie cutter neighborhood, like honestly, my neighborhood's a cookie cutter neighborhood. Most of my neighborhood was developed in the 50s, all the way from the early 50s to the late 50s. Most of the homes were originally built as 2-bedroom, 1-bath, 3-bedroom, 1-bath, 1-car garage, or 2-car garage. And that's all our original homes. Now, it's now been 70 years since then. So a lot of us, like me, we've expanded the home. And now I've got actually an extra 500 square feet on the home. And that added on a family room. And I have a 3/4 bathroom on my house. But still, a lot of other people have done that as well. So it's really easy just to like put the dot, because that's what it'll do. It'll go in a circle and then it figures out what are the comparable homes. However, you may at times need to go in and you can also do this on the MLS. And there's times I've had to do that on the MLS. I've had to do it on the MLS first. Then I've had to go into the cloud and then define which ones I want to add or subtract in the cloud, because you may know there's a certain block section that is unique within itself for whatever reason. And then in that section, you want to actually draw a map and pull out those comparables. The closer you can stay to that neighborhood that your target home is in, the better. But there's times you have to go beyond that. So let me give you 2 examples. One, when I had a home listed in Downey, Downey is like a lot of neighborhoods. Downey, there's the 5 freeway here. And then the next one is you have Firestone, and then you have Florence, and then you have another one, and then you have Imperial. And every section is a different price point. So if you just did the Cloud CMA and dropped it and did a big old circle, it would take in other price point neighborhoods. So when I did that, my numbers were a little bit off. When I went in and I said, no, I only want this neighborhood, then it was a little bit more on target. Now, in that instance too, I actually did cross the boulevard into the nicer neighborhood, because our home was one of the nicer homes in the neighborhood we were in. So I did go across the street to get in, and the homes, by the way, across the street were very much like this home. So I did get it in, but I didn't exclude the neighborhood that also we were currently in. So then what it did is it did a balance of the numbers between both of them. And that gave us the price point that we were looking at. Because yeah, we were at the higher end of the neighborhood in our neighborhood, and it did compare more across the street, but I also wasn't going to exclude the neighborhood we're in, saying, oh, we're just like them, so I'm going to take in only that neighborhood, because then people will be like, no, your price is totally off. It's way too high for this area. So that's how I averaged that in. Now, that was an easy way to do it. The one I just sold, I told you that we were on the market for 2.8. Literally, I had the appraisers tell me, right now, in the past 3 years, in the past 10 years, nothing is sold in Whittier above 2.2 million. So, and they said, we don't disagree with your price, but we're having a hard time finding comparables. Can you send us anything in the city of Whittier that compares, that's within that price point? So then I opened it all the way up to the city of Whittier. I looked at a certain price point and I sent it to them. So it depends on the area you're in. You know, for us, it was more like anything luxury in the city of Whittier, bingo, that's what we used as a comparable. Most of the time, it'll be a little bit more like I told you, the Downey house, or like my house, where you just go into a neighborhood and you stay within that neighborhood. Even my neighborhood, we have Rosemead, and then we have, I have Rosemead over here. I have Paramount to my left. I have Whittier Boulevard going north, and I have Washington Boulevard going south. I wouldn't go anywhere beyond that, because as soon as I cross any one of those boulevards, it's a different neighborhood. So the comparables are not the same. So I would keep all my comparables within that neighborhood. So so that's why, even if the automatic data pulling up shows that, oh, this one's outside the neighborhood, I have to look long and hard to see if that really compares, because does it really compare? Because it's technically not in my neighborhood. And is there enough within my neighborhood that does compare? Does that answer your question, Gabriel?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
The reasoning I'm asking is because the house that I'm listing, there's a newer house that it looks like an investor like dropped some money, and the house is really nice, and that's kind of like throwing me off on my price point because everything around it is cookie cutter, like you said, but this one house they dropped, I'm like, damn, that house is super nice, and like everything's been redone on it, so it just throws.
Okay.
No, that's going to be something.
Excellent question. No, you're excellent question, because if you walked into my neighborhood, some of these homes you walk into, the house is untouched. I mean, a lot of things in the house is going to be original. And it's like, okay, and maybe not kept up original too. Let me put it that way. Other homes like our home, we've done a lot of upgrades, and we're continuing to plan to do some more upgrades to our house. So you walk into our house and it's like, oh, okay, they haven't upgraded everything, but they have upgraded some things. And the example I gave you about Downey, that home, he put in marble countertops. Yes, the countertops were beautiful. Personally, I would never own marble because they're high maintenance, but the countertops were beautiful. They were also too high for the neighborhood. It was that thing like, yes, I understood you spent this much money on countertops. However, this neighborhood, most people don't have marble countertops. So he kind of overspent for it. So you take that into account. My question to you, Gabe, is a home similar square footage?
Square footage wise, yes. Style wise, no.
Style won't matter as much. Square footage, what about bedrooms and baths?
Same amount of bedrooms.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, like you look at it, and I don't know, I think they underpriced the house, but in the neighborhood, obviously nothing goes really expensive in that neighborhood.
Okay.
So for me, it's just like the house is like, because I wanted to price her house at 340, but this one they priced it at 349, and she hasn't done anything to the house in about 10 years. So I'm like, oh, okay, well then now it makes me drop the price, because I'm like, well, they're gonna compare that house to this house because it's like literally like 2 blocks away.
How long have they been on the market?
It was a week ago. I think it sold already. They put it out, and I think it sold a week and a half ago.
Okay, so let me tell you, they priced it low to get multiple competing offers, and that is a strategy. And that's one of the strategies. I love that you brought this up, because that is one of the strategies you bring up to one of your clients is like, listen, we can also price it below market value. And when we do that, we can get multiple competing offers. And when you get multiple competing offers, they'll start to compete with one another and start to give you better terms and a better price because they want to beat out the other offers. That's what they did on that other home. And a lot of investor homes, by the way, that is their strategy because they know that works. They'll really price it low because then it gets a lot of attention. It gets a lot of offers and people keep going. Also, when people look at the price of a home, a lot of times they realize, especially the market we're in now, where it's a seller's market, a lot of people will look at that and go, okay, I understand that's a list price of the home, but they're probably getting a lot of attention. So they're going to get multiple offers. So I'm going to go after above their list price. Now they may be listing it at market value or even a little bit above market value. But then when people know like, yeah, but I'm going to have to go above that price anyway. So let's not put in an offer. It creates that. So you have less offers. When you have it below market value, that's when you get a lot more of the, hey, we'll do this, this, and this. Now they may have listed it at 340, but you won't know how much they actually sold it for until escrow closes. Once title is recorded, then it'll tell you, oh, they may have gotten 355. They may have gotten, whatever for it. They may have gotten a higher price, and that'll let you know. So that would be, and I would have that same conversation with if somebody was an appraiser. If an appraiser was to say, hey, and most appraisers are pretty sharp on this, but if an appraiser was to say, well, yeah, but that house is priced at 340 and you guys got 351 for your house. So, well, yeah, but that home escrow hasn't closed yet. And you could call the other realtor and ask, but most realtors, they won't tell you the actual closing price until it's a done deal. You know, I've done that. Like I've had a couple of realtors call me up and go, can you do me a favor? Can you tell me? And we've gotten to that point of all contingencies are removed. We're like 2 days from escrow closing. It's a done deal. Yes, I'll tell you how much we actually are closing for. That I'm fine with. But if it's at the beginning of the process, knowing we may fall out of, you know, something may happen, and escrow, it's not necessarily a done deal. A lot of agents would be, because they want to protect their client, they're not going to tell you necessarily what it is. So even though you're seeing that other property, that's probably, especially if it's a flip, that's probably the strategy they use. If you are showing confidently that it should be listed at 349, I would still list it at that price.
Okay. Yeah.
And again, the market will tell you, have a conversation with your seller. Hey, this is what, and you can tell her everything I just told you. This is a strategy that you use, blah, blah, blah. We could go lower to try and get multiples, but also if you want to do it 349, you know, this is, and what I'll do too is I leave the choice up to my client. Then it's their choice. If they made a bad choice, they made a bad choice. I didn't tell them the choice to make. It is their property. So if they're in this transaction and, you know, they're like, no, I want to stick at 349. Okay. And then you get 2 offers. Okay, great. You got 2 offers, you know, and it's like, well, why didn't we get more offers? Well, remember when we had the conversation about what would get you more offers, we would have listed it less. So, you know, and you felt it was better to go in this direction. So this is what we have to work with, and let's move on from here. You know, you let them know like that. Or if they were to say, well, no, I want multiple competing offers, or I want a really smooth transaction. Well, if we get multiple competing offers, we can have them, you know, make the transaction really smooth. Plus, when we go into escrow, if a buyer knows that we have got 8 offers on this home and they're the one we picked, then that buyer is going to be much more easier to work with, because they know that if we cancel escrow, we have 8 other people we could go back to. And so that's the conversation you can have with your seller and let them know, like, this is where you're coming from, which, by the way, I also did that last year on a condo. We had a buyer that actually lied to us, and they changed a few terms that we didn't know about until the middle of escrow. And we never went back to the market. I went to all the other offers we got, and one of them came in and said, no problem, we'll take it up from there. And then we canceled escrow, opened escrow with them the next day, and we closed in 30 days as they promised. So that's a conversation you can have with your seller as far as why it's also a benefit to have a lot of offers, because you can go back to those offers. Does that help, Gabe?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, just, I mean, yeah, price it right. Make sure you don't overprice it, but just kind of price it right, just enough to wiggle, like, you know, the bait out there just to get more fish.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great way of putting it. And if they do want to overprice it, then you just have that conversation that, okay, you know, how about we revisit the marketing and the pricing in 2 weeks and see how things are going from there. And you know, that's the best you can do in that scenario. So bingo, determining asking price, you know, and we just covered that. That's a conversation you can have. Obviously, we're not going to get through this whole thing. I'm not going to rush you through this. So we'll continue the rest of this next week. Any questions? I'm going to move on, but any questions from everything we've talked about so far? Pretty quiet.
My only question is on the listing presentation. You said,
Yes.
you mentioned Scott Leroy, forward marketing, and what were the other ones where we can get templates for our listing presentations?
Scott Leroy, Michael Lewis is the
Michael.
other one. And if you go into command,
Mhm.
into the design section, you can put one together there. I know I'm being recorded. I'll be really honest. I've had some people tell me it's not the easiest thing to follow. I can tell you that sometimes, like the Scott Leroy and the other one, the Michael Lewis, sometimes when they give that to you, it's a PowerPoint document. So you can go in and it's easy to pop in your information, and then you just save it out as a PDF. And, you know, then you can print that out, and you can do it, you know, either way. Oh, and by the way, I will let you know that Forward Marketing, thanks for reminding me, Forward Marketing also has now a buyer's presentation. So if you need to do a buyer's presentation, they have a full buyer's presentation. A lot of time buyer's presentations, you're not going to be using as much because most of the time buyers know like, you know, oh, I'm going to work with you. Okay, great. And, you know, here, basically, you know, let's start looking at homes. Let's get you pre-qualified. And right now that's kind of how it goes. However, we highly recommend to have a broker, a BRE, the broker's agreement with your buyers. So buyers brokers agreement. Sorry, too much caffeine, a little tongue tied. Because then that will be like, hey, I'm working with you and you're working with me and we're working on this together. And when you do that, if you do have a copy of like a buyer's presentation, it's great to have something to back up, because then it's like, well, what are you know, okay, I'm fine with signing this, but what are we actually going to do? Well, let me show you. This is the kind of stuff that we'll work on together. And then that can help walk you through those sort of things. Now, and as I said, if you want to upload, you know, save it as a PDF and bring your iPad and just flip through the pages on your PDF, that's fine. You know, just make sure your receiving audience is open to that. I've had many transactions where my clients are totally fine with DocuSign and everything is DocuSign. I even did the listing agreement via DocuSign. I've had one time where I did the listing agreement right then in front of them. I said, well, I already have it ready to go. Let me hit send on my phone. I sent it. It came up on their phones. They DocuSigned the listing agreement. Bingo, we're off to the races. But I also have had a lot of clients like, I actually want to read through this, or, you know, that kind of thing. And they don't want to do it electronically. So I print out the listing agreement and then I go ahead and I hand it to them, you know, and it's like, okay. Which reminds me, by the way, if you need to fill out your clients. So as you're doing this whole listing presentation, I've had some clients of mine, I've gone to the extreme of, I literally represented an investment home of a dear friend of mine who passed away. And so I was helping the family sell the home, and we never had a listing contract. Oh my God, I know, you know, it's like right now, Joey's going to stab me, but we didn't have a listing contract, but I was very close with this family. And I already knew the investor and I was good friends with the investor, and I brought them together and they're like, hey, you know what? All of this sounds great, you know, and they wanted to move in that direction. So I just put together the RPA, the purchase agreement, and they signed that. And then I even told them afterwards, now technically escrow may ask for the listing agreement. So I'm going to send that to you guys and let's just get that signed. So we just know the percentages and everything. Okay, Rob, no problem. Rarity. I want to express that's a rarity, because that was somebody that I had that deep of a relationship with. I had another client of mine that I sold her home in Outpost Estates, and we still were very close friends. And so we talked about it and talked about it and talked about it. And she's like, okay. And she goes, well, Rob, bring the listing presentation or bring the listing contract and I'll go ahead and sign it. Okay, no problem. So I went there and so on. If she wanted to read it over, I would have left it with her. And then I would have come back later and picked up the signed contract, because we were very close friends and I can completely trust her. So that's not a problem. That tends to be more of a rarity, but still every once in a while, you know, you may know that. I've had two other opposite extremes. I had the one that I told you I was competing with with another realtor, and that was in Huntington Beach. And that home, it was the person who died, the best friend I'm very good friends with. And so I was recommended this way. But then the brother of the person who died is the one selling the home. I really don't have that, you know, I kind of know him now, but that's it. And we may get along and laugh, but that doesn't mean I have a signed contract. So I had the contract with me. So it was printed out and I had him sign it before I left. So I had the signed contract because I could leave and he could say, oh, no worries, I'll go ahead and DocuSign it. And then as soon as I leave, somebody talks to him and says, are you sure? Well, no, let me think about it, sort of thing. What if the other agent calls up right after I leave? Oh, I'll be right over with a signed contract. Did the other guy have you do that? See, it shows that he doesn't even have you sign a contract. No. I got a signature. I made sure before I left that place, I had a signature. And the Downey house I was talking about, I knew this guy pretty well. He was one of my business clients from when I used to do computer tech support and consulting. And we went ahead and he's like, Rob, I want you to sell the home and blah, blah, blah. And so great, we were in it. But in the middle of it, he started panicking because he was getting underwater financially. And he started like, he was saying some things. And I said, well, we could remarket it. We would have to break the current contract. And then I would need to sign another one. And in doing that, because of the conversations we had, I would make him actually in person sign the new contract first. Then I would have him sign the document that lets us cancel the first contract, because I needed to make sure that, oh, no, there's no way I'm losing this listing. There's no gap where he signs a cancellation and says, well, I'll get back to you with a listing agreement for the new one. Oh, no, that's not happening either. So why am I saying all this? If you're doing a listing presentation, most of the time, you're going to want to have that contract with you so it's ready to sign, because a lot of things can go wrong. And it's easy to be like, I trust you, blah, blah, blah. It seems like we get along great and so on. They may get along with everybody that way. You don't know. So you want to make sure that you have that ready to go. And it also speaks to your professionalism. It also speaks to you being ready. It also speaks to, hey, you know what? You're going to want a realtor that's going to be ready to go and also a pretty good negotiator. So it's not just going to be like, oh, whatever sort of thing. No, I have the contract here because I'm ready to do business with you. I am ready to make sure that I am the best agent that's ready to work for you, that I have everything ready to go when we go to market, that when a buyer gives us an offer, that I'm ready to negotiate that offer and just not go with the flow. So make sure you have that contract with you and ready to sign. You want to make sure that's ready to go. That's the reason why we also do the buyer broker agreements too, because then that way you're assured that they're working with you and that you're working with them. And it just is that mutual thing. Does any questions on that one there?
No.
Okay, good. Because when I first started, I wanted to trust everyone. And, I soon learned like, no, and professionally, it also comes off a little bit. Honestly, it came off casually. You're like, oh, okay, no problem. Unless, like I said, I had that relationship with them that I knew would not be broken anyway. That I knew, and I've only had a few instances of that from my database of people that I was that close to that it's like, oh no, it's a done deal. But tread that one lightly. Make sure it really is that, because in this business, we've all had surprises. So, understand that. And a little side note, don't get super hurt if all of a sudden somebody out of the blue that you knew does a real estate transaction. Now, first ask yourself, what's my responsibility in that? Did I keep in touch with them enough? Did they know this is what I was doing? Did they know that I would want to help them? And that can be either side. And if you answered yes to all of that, it still could be something that's out of your hands. But if you answered, well, no, I really didn't keep in touch, or I didn't let them know, or any of those things. And it's not being aggressive necessarily. It's just helping them understand this is what you're doing and this is what you want to help them with. That could be part of it. But understand too, my best friend and his partner bought a home in Glendale and I wasn't their agent. But that was because his partner never does business with family or friends. And literally just last year, my best friend was my best man in my wedding. I couldn't be any closer to him if I had to be, but they like to keep it separate, because if anything went weird, some people don't want to have a business relationship with their business people. They don't want to have a personal relationship with them as well. And that's something out of your hands. So understand that. Now, what could I have done in that situation? I could have asked, do you guys currently have an agent? I know you don't want to work with me. And I completely respect that, but I can refer you to an agent. And then the other agent, it's all on them. And if you would like, I would still get a referral fee. So that way, that would have been okay. But quite honestly, I got hurt. And it was one of those things why, and I got angry because most of the time when we're angry, it's out of hurt. So I got hurt and I got angry and I didn't have that conversation with him until well after the fact. I own that. That was on me. So understand that there are going to be times that's going to happen, but make sure you do your due diligence to understand that wouldn't have happened. And I don't know if I would have gotten a referral fee off of that property because I never asked. Is that part clear? Okay.
Yes.
I'm going to cut it off at listing sale for property because that's when we talk about a little bit of the marketing in that. And so I'll dive into that. And then, and then that's when you attract the qualified buyers. So that's when we get into the multiple listing service, the print, all of that kind of stuff. And by the way, I stole this chart from I overlaid it and then I hand laid it all out again in Adobe InDesign. So I did literally put this together piece by piece, but somebody had the blueprint for me ready to go. And I have edited it over the years because there's things like virtual tour and a few other things that wasn't on that chart before because the chart was a little old. So, things do change in our industry. When some little tips and tricks, and so that we can leave off with that. When you're doing the listing agreement, Gabe has directly understood that it's actually a very simple agreement. It's not like the purchase agreement. The purchase agreement is because the purchase agreement spells out the entire transaction. So it's very detailed and there's a lot to it. The listing agreement is pretty straightforward. It's going to have the title of, it's going to have the owners of the property. It's going to have the property address. It's going to have the APN, which is the parcel number, the assigned parcel number for the property. And that you're going to want to put in there. That's very easy to look up. You can look it up, when you look up title and you plug in the address, that should come up. So it's not difficult to put that in, but you want to put the APN in there. Would it make it null and void? No, but it just makes it easier if the APN is in there, because eventually when it goes into escrow, it's going to be looked up anyway, because that's what they use. You're going to putting the listing agreement. Now, the standard is 6 months. That's usually the standard. So right now, it is February 1st. So, you can count on your fingers if you need to go 6, and then you get to the 1st, which would be August 1st. So bingo, it goes to August 1st. Some sellers will be like, oh my God, why is it going that long? That's just the standard that everybody does. But in this market, as you can see, things are moving very quickly. If a home is priced correctly, make sure you qualify that. Because if you say things are moving very quickly and they're overpriced, then it's like, well, why isn't our home selling? If the home is priced correctly, as you can see, things are moving very quickly. So that's just the gap in there. And I've had one or two sellers say, well, I want to sell it, I don't feel comfortable with that. Okay, then usually people will have it. And that Huntington Beach home, by the way, that was one thing I did. When I showed up, it was a 6-month contract. He didn't want it that long. He's like, well, things are selling a lot faster. Okay, no problem. As long as we're priced correctly, I have no problem changing it to a 3-month contract. And that's what we did, because we did. But if it would have been way overpriced, I would have been, well, we're actually asking for the high end of the market. And at that price point, we may be on the market for a little while. You got to determine everything in this industry. It's not blanket. It's not like, oh, that's a one answer fits all. Every seller, every situation, every motivation, everything is different. So you have to feel that out and figure out how you're going to present it. And when you have a contract, let's say it's pre-printed out. this is how the contracts in the industry work. The contract is pre-printed out and it has 6 months, and they're like, no, I want 3 months instead. Anything that's black and white in the contract it's at, think of it this level. Then anything that you fill in on the computer, which is printed in, or you choose or check or whatever, it's the next level. So that takes precedence over anything here. So if you notice on some of the things on the contract, it may say, like, especially the purchase agreement, it may say something like 3 days, and then a blank with a check box, and then so many days. So the default is, because it's in black and white and it's pre-printed, that is 3 days. All of a sudden you say, nope, it's going to be 4 days or 2 days, and you check that box, that takes precedence. Okay. I want to make that clear. On top of that, what if you cross something off and initial it and then write it in? That is the highest level. That is the highest level. So why am I saying all this? You go in, and I've done this with listing agreements. I go in, I'll have the dates already in there. I'll have the price that I think it should be in there. And then we change that. Okay, no problem. Let me scratch that off, initial it, and write in what it should be. That is whatever I hand wrote in there, that's what takes precedence. And that's considered the highest level. So let's say you have, the home should be listed, the home's worth $894. We can list it at $899, or we can list it at $889. I would say $889, but and they're like, no, it needs to be higher. No problem. Not that you have to go back, because remember, you also want this contract signed. And this is when you can have that conversation with them. If they're like, yeah, but originally you have in there this, I understand. But let me say that the highest level of precedence is a handwritten anything. So if I cross this off, that means nothing anymore. We'll initial it, and then we'll put in the price that we both agree it should be listed for, or the dates it should be listed for. That is the highest precedence level. So also don't have a fear of taking in a contract and a listing agreement and thinking like, oh, I got to change something. Now I've got to redo it. No. Do it right then and there. Get the signature right then and there. Have everything done right then and there. Then you have everything ready to go. I want to make sure that's clear, because I was always thinking like, oh, also, I'm not going to take a listing agreement with me because we still have to determine price. We still have to determine this. And then, let me get the signature there. Now, I will also say, if you talk to Pete Buonocore, Pete deals with very high-end homes in Hancock Park and those type of homes. He also deals in the hills and that kind of stuff. His type of clients are a totally different type of client. He gets almost all of his business from the golf course. He's an avid golfer. He knows people at the country club and so on. He will do a 2-visit listing presentation. The first one is to look at the house, get a feel for everything. And the second time he comes and does everything we talk about. That's Pete. Pete's been in the business for years. He has a reputation. He also knows his clientele, and he will tell you he may curb that if he also knows he's competing with somebody else, and he may do it all in one visit too. Okay. But again, every situation is different. Everything is different. And if you're a beginning realtor, you're not at that point. Let me just say that I'm not at that point. I want to make sure that especially if I know I may be competing with somebody else, like I said, last year in Huntington Beach, here we're signing right here. Oh, I went 3 months. No problem. Let me cross that off. We'll change it for a 3-month period of time. 3 months from today is blah, blah, blah. Bingo. It's in there. Good. Let's sign it. So I just want to make that clear getting into this, because you don't want to lose a listing because you want to be a nice person, because that's not really what's going on here. You're still being a nice person. You're trying to help them. And you don't want something like, oh, I don't know if I can change that. Also saying you're going to need to come back, and then you may lose a listing that way. You want to make sure that, especially if you may only have one shot, you have the listing ready to go and ready for them to sign. And then you even leverage that. You let them know like, look, I have everything ready to go. I even have the listing agreement ready to go. That's how prepared I am. And that's how I'm going to serve you when we're doing this. And I'm going to make sure that when we are working with the buyers, that everything is ready to go and doing the best we can to make sure it's a smooth transaction for you. Having that and insisting on that gives that credibility to you that, yeah, you're going to do that and you're going to follow through. All of that makes sense.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Then, perfect. We'll cut it halfway and we'll continue the rest of this next week.
Yeah, this was very informative. Thank you so much.